what your glucose reading is really telling you. If you want to eat like this, then your fasting glucose should be between 75 and 85 milligrams per deciliter. But you also need to realize or understand that eating this way is a treat, and it's not something that you can do every day or even all of the time, because it does have consequences. The body was never meant to deal with that amount of sugar all the time. So as we discuss glucose, let's figure out where it came from and where we're going with a little bit of history right now. And the history of glucose actually spans centuries. Texts as early as 1500 BC. That's 3,525 years ago from 2025. It was described in honey and fruits because they were described for their sweetness. And in the 16th and 17th centuries, that's 1501 AD to 1700 AD, alchemists and chemists began isolating sugar from natural sources like raisins. Well, it's kind of hard to do this next segment with a straight face. But in the 1500s, Swiss physician Paracelsus, I'll put his picture up here, noted sweet substances in the urine. It attracted ants, and they also dipped a finger in there and tasted it too. That was later linked to diabetes. And it looks like Sir Paracelsus was sampling what he was studying. And now diabetes, if you look at the word, the etymon, let's break it down. Dia is Greek and it means through. And the Greek babble, and I don't exactly know how to say the word, it means to pass or go through. So diabetes means to pass or go through, and that started to be described in the 1500s. So as we are going through time, we're now up to 1674, and English physician Thomas Willis, another urine drinker,
Whiz in one of the empty beer bottles in the back. They're on the floor. Tic Tac, sir?
described what we now know as diabetes mellitus. And the mel in that is actually another etymology term, or it comes from the Greek for honey, and I'll put that here so you can see that. So now we have two descriptors, diabetes mellitus and diabetes insipidus. And one means it's sweet, and the other basically means it's not. Now, the scientist Andreas Margolf in 1747 started to make another set of discoveries on all this sweetness. And he was able to isolate and distinguish that the sweetness in raisins was actually a different substance than the sweetness in cane sugar. So now we have another type of molecule. And so we didn't quite get to glucose yet, but that's coming next. In 1792, French chemist Jean-Baptiste Dumas actually coined the term glucose. Glu is from the Greek, and that meant sweet, and this kind of actually floors me. And then the OSE is from the French, which means thing. So generally when you are saying the word glucose, you're saying sweet thing. So the next time you want to call your sweetheart sweet thing, call her glucose. I distinctly remember in college writing out papers and stuff, and if you used the thing to describe itself, that was counted against you. But here we can actually do it. Or I don't know where those police were, where were their teachers that were going to correct them. But just because, as my patients say, you use the $5 doctor term, you get away with it. So there you have that.
You got a tattoo!
So do you, dude? No. Dude, what does my tattoo say?
Sweet! What about mine?
Dude, what does mine say?
Sweet! What about mine?
Now, we're not done with our physician friend Jean-Baptiste Dumas, because in 1838, he described the chemical composition of glucose. So for your nerds out there, get your nerd hat on.
People judge you differently than they did in high school. Where are they? I think they're talking about us.
The chemical composition is C6H12O6. So now things are really starting to heat up in the glucose diabetic world. And by 1889, they are taking dogs and they are removing, well, you can't see the pancreas in that, so they are removing the pancreas in dogs and they are actually inducing diabetes. And so with this discovery, they now know, oh, this organ has something to do with this disease. Now, how can we control it? How can we start to change it? In the early 1900s, so remember, they're inducing diabetes in dogs in 1889. Now we're at 1902, and the Nobel Prize for the identification of this stereochemistry. So you have to think about when we look at a molecule on paper, it's two-dimensional. We know that these things are three-dimensional in nature. They have receptor sites on the cells. It's a very specific site, and if the receptor site and the actual molecule don't match up, there is no effect. And we have now identified the receptor sites, actually the stereochemistry, the receptor sites will come soon after. So 1920, so from 1900 to 1920, there's all kinds of research happening, all the way up until 1921 when they actually isolate insulin. So from 1900 to 1920, they're starting to see how glucose works in metabolism and how the glucose molecule gets broken down and then converted into ATP so that we have the ability to produce energy. You actually don't run on glucose, you actually run on ATP. Little fun fact, cyanide stops the production of ATP and that's why it kills you so quickly. But that is starting to be understood. The glycolysis, the breaking down, the cutting or breaking apart of the sweet thing is what starts to give you ATP molecules and it gives you energy. And just on a side note, they're looking at people who got diabetes and they started to see that this is a disease of affluence, meaning that if you had a lot of money, basically you could afford to overeat and you could afford the simpler carbohydrates and the sugar and stuff like that. And so it became a disease of affluence. And what we're really starting to get into here is insulin resistance. So we really have to kind of keep that in the back of our minds. It's not the glucose molecule itself that's the problem. It's what the glucose does in your body when you have it present all the time. And so, the functional medicine doctors are now actually going through and we measure insulin because we know it's not really the glucose molecule that's causing the problem. It's the insulin resistance that is causing the problem. So in the 20s, they found that if they gave the dogs insulin, then they controlled the blood sugar. And if you controlled the blood sugar, you controlled the diabetes. But once again, here's where we have to think, do we want to control it or do we want to eliminate it? Because you really got to think, a little foreshadowing. We're now terming the neurodementive diseases as diabetes type 3. So your Alzheimer's, your dementia, any of that. They're even seeing Parkinson's and Lewy body. They're all being related to that insulin resistance. And so we now don't think of it so much as glucose. You know, our knowledge is evolving, and we're seeing that it's a problem with insulin because we're allowing insulin levels to get too high. Fasting insulin should be between 3 and 4 if you're healthy. We allow it medically to be up to 26, and that's crazy. This molecule lasts in your bloodstream about 3 hours. So it doesn't go away quickly. And so it's allowed to do a lot of insidious things in that amount of time. And now we're coming to the point in time where we're really able to recognize the tools that we're using with enzymatic assays, your CGMs, your glucose monitors, to see that we can actually use those and recognize those by the 40s and the 50s. They're using mass spec, gas chromatography, and then the enzymatic assays happen to where we are today, where we're using CGMs with an artificial pancreas, an insulin pump, to actually control the diabetes. But once again, we're talking about something that can be controlled pretty easily through lifestyle. Does it mean that you never eat birthday cake again? No, although I really don't care if I ever eat birthday cake again or not. That's not my bag. So if you have this stuff under control, though, you know, a treat's just that. It's supposed to be a treat, not a daily, not a weekly, maybe once a month, once every 2 months, whatever the case may be. So we really have to ask ourselves a question. And the question is, why has the American population become so diabetic, so insulin resistant, so neurodegenerative? You know, we are seeing an absolute epidemic of dementia and Alzheimer's and all of those things. Why is that so prevalent now? And those are the questions that we have to ask ourselves, because we're seeing younger and younger and younger people getting those things, and it really is starting to affect society. Because when you have a not so elderly, I mean, it's not uncommon now to start to see people in their 50s and 60s showing signs of dementia or diabetes type 3, and we really have to take that in thought and figure out what's happening, and insulin resistance plays a huge part of that. And we need to really cut back, because honestly, in America, we are truly blessed to be able to, you can go get 200 calories for 99 cents down at the corner market. But is it a quality calorie? Is it a quality nutritional calorie? Is it something that builds you up, or does it just hit that hedonic center of the brain, meaning the pleasure center of the brain, giving you a quick hit of dopamine, and then leading you down a road of degeneration and pain? And it's a slow fall. You know, this doesn't kill us quickly. This kills us very slowly. And it is a lifestyle disease. My point about all of that is that insulin, cardiovascular disease, and neurodegenerative diseases all go hand in hand. So if you are having problems with high triglycerides, high cholesterol, low HDLs, high LDLs, the old school cholesterol test is kind of worthless. Doesn't really tell us the information we need to know. You really need to do like an NMR and see the size of the particles, because insulin makes those particles small, hard, and dense, and we don't want that. And now I'm going to invite you to do this very thing that I invite my patients in the clinic to do. Go to Woodstock 1969. The internet is a wonderful thing. And if you go and look at those videos, show me pictures of people that look like me. And you don't see them. Everybody in those pictures in 1969 is lean. They're lean, they have abs, they, aren't necessarily bodybuilders by any means. And that's how much our environment has changed in a very little, you're only talking 50 years. And now if you go look at a picture of a Woodstock or a Louder Than Life or any of those types of big concert, multi-day concerts, you don't see that. That's not the norm. The norm is overweight, in wheelchairs, sick. And that's how much we have changed that in just 55 years. What we really need to look at is what has changed. And, I say the environment, the food environment changed. If you go back to 1970s, mid 70s, now all of a sudden you have this wonderful little sweetener that comes along called high fructose corn syrup. And it's great in that it's sweet, it's cheap, it makes all of this horrible food that it has all the organic material and the nutrition that your body needs, has that all taken out. But this little molecule can make it palatable. And I just want you to think for 1 minute here. A McDonald's cheeseburger. How many of the components of a McDonald's cheeseburger have high fructose corn syrup in it? The bun, the ketchup, I think they even preserve the onions that way, the pickles, it's in the meat. The only thing that really doesn't have high fructose corn syrup in it in that sandwich, mustard. So it's not that, and I hate to say this, but high fructose corn syrup in very small amounts once in a while isn't really going to kill you or really take you down. But you get microdosed with it in everything, and that starts to add up. And as that adds up, there's a cost to your health that you pay, because the human body was never meant to see that much sweetness or caloric intake, and you're not getting any nutrition. And so in the healthcare field, we have a saying that our patients are overfed and undernourished, because you'll get these big people that come in and they have zero nutrition, but they're eating, and when they eat, they're just eating empty calories. Now, I will tell you that there's a great video. It's kind of dry, kind of long. Once again, nerd hat. It is by Dr. Lustig, and it is called Sugar, the Bitter Truth. That is a great video that kind of tells you how high fructose corn syrup works in the body. The cliff notes here, it's super simple. It goes through your liver exactly like alcohol, causes 8 of the 12 very same maladies and symptoms that alcoholism causes. And remember a little bit ago when I told you there's some foreshadowing. High glucose levels start to change the way that your body reacts and the immunity is. So that sugar starts to suppress the immune system. And when we see that happening, it causes a lot of problems, especially for people who have had chronically high glucose levels. That's part of what we see in the cytokine storm. And that doesn't allow the body to shut the immune system off. So it just continues and it starts to attack itself. So that's one of the things that we start to see with high glucose levels and high insulin levels and insulin resistance. We start to see autoimmunity happening. But it does change the morphology of blood. And you have to remember that when you're changing the morphology of blood, it takes at least 3 months, because the red blood cell lasts about 3 months. It takes at least 3 months to start to get those things out if you stopped everything at that point in time. So what do you get? What does the body do? You start to see slow wound healing, chronic infections. So if you're somebody that does just line after line after line, or dose after dose after dose of antibiotics, then you have an immunity issue, and you should really start to check your insulin levels. And don't think because you're taking a berberine or you're taking insulin, don't think that you're saving yourself, because you're not. Did you know that high glucose levels is actually directly linked to inflammation? And so when you start to see high blood sugar levels and they stay high, then you start to see markers like tumor necrosis alpha. You start to see interleukin 6, interleukin 9. You start to see these inflammatory markers edging up. In my patients, if I see somebody who is thin but has tons of arthritis, I'll pull an insulin, and usually, I won't go 9 times out of 10, but I'll say 8 times out of 10, they have high insulin levels. And that sugar dysregulation is driving the arthritis. So let's take a moment and discuss the difference between dietary glucose, so the glucose that you eat, and then the glucose that's in serum or in the blood, because there's a difference in the way that your body utilizes those and how available they are to produce ATP, which once again, ATP is what you actually run on. So the molecule of glucose, actually what we eat, the molecule of glucose, and what is in the bloodstream or the cell, that glucose really isn't any different. The molecule is exactly the same. But glucose that you eat can't be used for energy production from anywhere from 1 to 3 hours, depending on the amount of or how it is consumed, essentially. So the glucose that you eat has to go through the digestive system and it has to be absorbed. Whereas the glucose that's in the liver and has been already processed by the body is immediately ready to go into the cell or in the cell, and then it hits the mitochondria. The mitochondria puts it through the electron transport chain, and out comes energy. So, as we look at this, if you're drinking a soda, that is almost immediately absorbed, spikes blood sugar, and that is pretty readily available to be turned into energy. Whereas say you're eating a sandwich or eating something complex carbohydrates, it takes a while longer to break that down into the glucose. So that's where the issue starts to play in us, because we really don't have things in nature that give you immediate access. So if you're drinking your glucose, the problem is that gets into the system, spikes blood sugar, and then your body will actually release a lot of insulin to start to process that. Because remember, the body does not want high blood sugars. So this whole process that your body is going through when you eat something to break down the components, the macromolecules into the glucose, that actually starts in your mouth. And there's an enzyme that starts to break carbohydrates down called amylase. And as that is released, it starts to break down your starches and things of that nature. So you can actually inhibit amylase by drinking vinegar, apple cider vinegar. That's kind of a craze right now. Everybody's using apple cider vinegar, and apple cider vinegar inhibits amylase. So it slows that process of breaking the carbohydrates down into glucose. So, a little trick if you have diabetes or you have some other type of issue with blood sugar control, actually try the apple cider vinegar trick. It does help. Now, some interesting facts that you may not know, but your brain is a very hungry organ. It uses 20 to 25% of your blood glucose daily. So you want to have good, high quality foods that are feeding this. You don't want things that cause inflammation, simple sugars, candies, and things like that. typically have things in them that cause the immune system, not only just the sugar, but cause the immune system and the liver to have to work harder. And so the brain is just not, it's not something that you really want to mess with. Like I've said before or earlier, they're terming neurodegenerative diseases now as diabetes type 3, actually Alzheimer's in particular. But when the when the blood-brain barrier becomes leaky, the sugar gets in there and it causes a lot of problems. And that's an oversimplification, but we're not going for a PhD level explanation here. And another little fun fact, there are really only about 4 hormones that help your body actually regulate and control insulin. And of those 4 hormones, how many of those hormones do you think raise blood sugar, and how many of those hormones do you think lower blood sugar? Well, 3 of the 4 raise blood sugar and only 1 lowers. So what do you think the normal or natural state of the body is? And when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about blood sugar levels. Do you think that the body typically always has higher blood sugars, or we're used to that high blood sugar? Or do you think that we're generally supposed to be at a lower state of a blood sugar, and then all of these other 3 hormones are things to actually cause it to go up so that you're ready for whatever the case may be? And that is something that we really have to start to think about, because if we're eating things all the time, sodas and candies and highly processed foods that break down very quickly, what do all of those things do? They all boost blood sugar, they all raise it. And you only have 1 hormone that lowers blood sugar, and that's insulin. And so you don't want to sit there and be hitting that one all the time. It's a whole lot easier to raise blood sugar than it is to lower blood sugar. And well, at least in our environment. So you've got to think that this matters. And we really need to start to look at, we really need to make it easier for us to be healthy than unhealthy. And the problem is everybody says, "Oh, you're taking away my choices. Oh gosh, this is you know." At the end of the day, is that soda really worth it? I mean, if it's going to take your toes and your feet and your legs, and they chop your legs off up to your knees, because that happens. I mean, we volunteer in a lot of nursing homes, and we see guys rolling around on the little scooters, and they don't have any legs. And why do they not have any legs? Because they just had to have that cake or that soda or whatever the case may be. Is it really worth it? Especially if in your 20s, 30s, and 40s and 50s, if you can actually sit here and say, "Oh, hey, you know what? I'm going to pass on that cake today. I'll probably take you up on it, at another time." It doesn't hurt you. But, we have a self-control issue. So let's talk about those 4 hormones. Let's talk about insulin, glucagon, epinephrine, and cortisol. As we talk about these 4, you're going to see what I was talking about, that insulin's the only one that lowers. When we look at cortisol, cortisol is has a normal natural rhythm. We actually measure that in the cortisol awakening response. You should get a spike of cortisol early in the morning, right after you wake up, and then that should cruise the rest of the day and get lower. Now, as you get excited, as you get threatened, as you do stuff, the cortisol will spike as sympathetic nervous tone spikes. With that being said, epinephrine, that's a sympathetic response. Cortisol, rhythmic, does answer to sympathetic tone or being responded that way. And glucagon's kind of the same way. Other than glucagon, that comes in when you're fasting. And so one of the instances of fasting. And these four hormones very tightly control the blood sugar levels. So everybody wants to think that blood sugar affects those hormones, which it kind of does. But more importantly, those four hormones are meant to very tightly regulate your blood sugar levels. So in a case of diabetes, and we got to really think about this, what's the first thing that starts to go wrong? And you can measure insulin and glucagon and cortisol and all of these things. But do you think that blood sugar is the first thing that goes wrong? And so you see high blood sugars? Or do you think that's near the end when we catch it when you're already done a lot of damage? So you got to think about that critically for a second. And no, blood sugar is one of the last things that happens because your body uses those four hormones to really tightly regulate that. The first thing that we see is dysregulated insulin. So when we're measuring blood sugar and we're just waiting for your blood sugar to go wrong, I got to be kind of honest. It seems like we're just waiting on it to go wrong so we can medicate you. Otherwise, we'd be measuring insulin, which that'll be in another video, but we should be measuring that because that goes wrong first. And when that starts to get dysregulated and it's high, well, then you have a problem, and it's a problem in the brewing. It's in the making. So those are the things that you really want to watch first. Not blood sugar. Blood sugar comes at the end. And those peaks and valleys, those are the things that start to show that we have a problem brewing and we need to get on it now. Don't wait until the engine is knocking to start to look into it. When the little red light comes on, hey, let's see what's happening. And the little red light for us is slow wound healing. People that get confused and can't think, and you're really kind of waiting a little bit late there because the brain's very sensitive and it's hard to affect. But those are signs and symptoms that you need to watch for. So let's take just a quick moment and talk about how you can control your blood sugar. And this is something that people don't think about. Your muscles do not require insulin to get energy sugar into them. So they are an independent glucose sink. So you want to work the legs, you want to work the glutes, you want to work these big muscles, especially if you have diabetes, because you need to use those muscles to chew through the sugar so that it starts to lower. Because we all think about, I shouldn't say it that way. The thing that we have to think about is in insulin resistance, the cell has insulin trying to push glucose into it. If the cell is saturated, it closes, it pulls those receptors back in, and it doesn't allow the blood sugar to go in or the glucose to go in. And so then what does your body do? Your body increases insulin to try to make the cell push the receptor out to grab that and bring more in, but it's saturated. The gas tank is full. What happens if you're trying to get the last couple of pennies of gas out of that hose? It spills out onto the ground. And so once again, high blood sugar, when we're measuring that in the serum and everything that's around the cell, when we're measuring that, that is one of the last signs that you're insulin resistant and you have much bigger problems happening. So we need to pay attention to that. And I'm not talking about type 1 diabetics here. I am talking about those people who are on insulin, who are type 2 diabetics, and they're causing problems by injecting more insulin, taking more insulin. You have to start to, like I was saying, you have to start to work out because that's an independent glucose sink. I like to sit down and play games with my buddies as much as the next guy, But I also make sure I go on bike rides and I get up and I move and I do those things because you have to work the muscles. Once again, this goes back to the way we are actually designed. Our eyes are in the front of our heads. We are predatory by nature. We go out and we track our food down. We don't have strong claws. We don't have vicious teeth. We wear stuff down and then bludgeon it, beat it in the past to death, and that's what we ate. And we don't do that now. We're not hunter gatherers. We are sitters and computer typers. And that's just talking about exercise. What you eat matters, and when you eat matters. So you can control blood sugar through stress, through exercise, through diet, through sleep, and we'll get into those a little more. How healthy are you? When I was in my 30s and 40s, I was about 300 pounds, and the problem with that is I was not metabolically healthy. My body couldn't switch from glucose to ketones. It didn't do that. It does that now. And so it's getting into that metabolically flexible state where you can go from burning glucose to burning ketones, or burning the ketones to make the ATP, because your body can use either glucose or ATP. So sugar is not the only thing that powers your body. And so when we talk about stress, you got to think about that's that cortisol component. And the more stressed and the more active, the more you worry, your body doesn't know between real and imagined things. And so it will always respond to stress as it's being chased, fight or flight. You want to make sure that you can control that. And that's pretty simple, and we'll go over it, but breathing, prayer, meditation, get out in nature, have some fun, those types of things. And something that I want to discuss before I go on is another sign or symptom when people are talking about, oh, I'm not diabetic, I'm hypoglycemic, I need to eat that sugar. That's an excuse. Because what is happening is they're going along and they're going to eat something that's crappy, and that's going to spike their blood sugar. So it goes along, they spike their blood sugar, and then all of a sudden that simple sugar is processed and now it's gone, but there's still insulin there. And what happens? We now break below that baseline plane and we have a hypoglycemic event. And that is because there's too much insulin in the bloodstream, or the cells are insulin resistant, and that hypoglycemic event happens. So then they drink their soda, they take their little glucose pill, they drink their orange juice, whatever the case may be, they spike it again. And then they feel really good, and they're going for about 45 minutes to an hour, and then it happens again. And they're chasing their tail with that stuff. The other thing is if there's too much insulin, even if they're not eating something, high insulin drives down blood sugar, and that's where people just are chronic. One of the cases of chronically tired. You could have problems with the hormones, which insulin resistance causes problems with the hormones, but hormones can cause fatigue. So once it all goes hand in hand, and you can control that through your diet also. So eating whole foods typically helps control that diet pretty well. Kind of what the consensus on where your blood sugar should really be, because as I'm talking about all this, all we say medically is less than 126 milligrams per deciliter, you're not diabetic. If you're at 100, you're pre-diabetic. We're still just talking about blood sugar, but I would proffer this as a better metric than following blood sugar. Look at how much your blood sugar oscillates. So if you get 40 point or better swings in your blood sugar, you have a problem. You're metabolically probably inflexible, and you're headed towards diabetes in a hurry. You do not want to see that oscillation. Another thing to look at while we're talking about glucose, and a lot of people like to fast, do water fasts and stuff like that. How healthy are you? Because if you've been eating really crappy for a long time, you don't have the amino acids, you don't have good protein. Look at people who have gone and done the bariatric surgeries and stuff like that. Their skin gets real flabby because they lost rapid weight. But then if you grab their arm, you don't feel muscle because the body is catabolizing, breaking down the proteins and doing things like that. Why do we see a lot of bariatric patients develop autoimmune diseases? Because they can't get the amino acids in that they need. So you have to be relatively healthy to do fasting and to do these things that make you more healthy and give you longevity and allow you to be active. So it's not just about starving yourself. It's not just about covering what you're eating with your insulin, because you're doing long-term damage. And that's the hardest things for us as humans to do, because we want cause and effect, and we want it to be immediate so we can draw the one-to-one conclusion. But now we have a long enough timeline of looking at these things that we see, oh, when you're allowing these big oscillations and you're allowing blood sugar to stay high and insulin to stay high, we see that it causes cardiovascular disease and dementia and all of these things. And why aren't our politicians and our food people looking at the food industry and making changes to make it easier to be healthy? Because they say, I think in the next 10 years, I forget exactly, I'll look it up, but in the next few years, our expenditure on diabetes will outpace our military budget. And that's crazy. So let's start to get into the nitty gritty of like lab values and stuff like that. And it's really simple. I could have not done the previous 40 minutes and just said, hey, your blood sugar needs to be between 75 and 85 fasting. What does that tell you? I want you to understand how we got to where we're at. And so the next thing that you need to know is how do labs get their values? Not only that, how do they figure in the value, and how often do they refigure the value? So who goes, oversimplification, but it's pretty accurate. Who goes to the hospital? Do sick people go to the hospital? I'm 54 and I haven't been to the hospital in, oh God, 5 years. My last thing that I went in for was a hernia repair. And prior to that was decades. So I don't go to the hospital. Sick people go to the hospital. And that's where they have their blood values coming from. And they refigure them every so often. And so over time, we have seen the normal for what the blood should be raising. So they take all of their sick people that have come in, that have given them blood, and they look at the sugar value and they say, hey, here's where 80% of the people hit. Now we're going to give them 2 standard deviations above and 2 standard deviations below. And that's the normal. So do you think blood sugar values, did you go look at the 1969 Woodstock? Do you think their blood sugar values are going to be the same as our blood sugar values now in 2025? I can tell you no. Because we have allowed that to grow. And how do I know that? Because you can look at the liver values, look at AST and ALT. And once again, if you listen to Lustig, you've got some ideas here where I'm going. But When we looked at World War II blood values, so we had a cohort, a group, a population of people who were healthy. They had their blood drawn. We have access to that, and they went back and looked. Those values were 20 or below. In 2025, do you know what the normal values for ALT and AST are? Medically, we say it's below 40. So it is more than doubled in that amount of time. Does normal mean healthy? Were we healthier back then or healthier now? And I think that answer is that's obvious. It's a rhetorical question. They were a lot healthier back then than we are now. So as we look at that, we need to sit here and say, okay, what are the values that we should be looking at? And so the values are now this. The values are between 75 and 85 fasted. Insulin, that's another video. You've heard me say it, but I'm not going to repeat it because I want you to watch the other video. So now let's actually talk about glucose and what happens with the dysregulation of glucose and what this means to you. So if you are outside those ranges, if your glucose is low, so you're below that 75 fasted, let's say you run 40, 50, or 60, and all the time, and you have symptoms where you're groggy and you don't feel good and you can't think. Or on the flip side of that, let's talk about if you're over that 85 and you're always at 90 to 100 or 125. For some reason, the magic number is 126. If you're at 126, you're now diabetic. Why does one number matter? So as in most things in health, it's not black or white. It is a continuum. And so I don't know how to visualize a continuum for you. I might figure out something, but basically it's not like at this point in time you're sick. No, there is this, you're limping along, you're the walking wounded. So let's cover high blood sugar first. What does it mean that if your fasting blood sugar is 90 to 100? Well, first off, let's just say this. You're pre-diabetic. I know they like that 100 range, but you're getting up there. So if you are in that range where you're high, that could be a vitamin B1 deficiency, thiamine. So do you eat high quality foods? And do they have lots of B vitamins? Are you experiencing fatigue because your B vitamins are all associated with fatigue? So you got to kind of figure that out. What are other symptoms? What does it mean in context? So we're looking at this and we're saying, okay, you have high blood sugar. How are the B vitamins? Are you tired? Are you stressed? What are what's happening? What does your diet look like? Are you eating red meat? Are you eating animal proteins? Because that's a good way to get the amino acids and the B vitamins. Are you eating liver? Same thing there. There's a lot of things that affect that. So B vitamins are very, very important to this. You could have liver congestion or fatty liver. The next thing is you could also be looking at, well, you have to correlate that. If your blood sugars are high, the next thing you want to go look at is, oh, what are my liver enzymes? What's AST? What's ALT? What are they telling me about my health right now? Once again, you look at that. If the ALT and AST are also high, then you're looking at some of the liver issues. So next, we're going to talk about metabolic syndrome. And some of you may have heard of this. You may have also heard about it being called Syndrome X. It's been known by a couple of different names, but it's recently just been categorized as metabolic syndrome. And what that means is it's actually a cluster of symptoms. And so when we look at that, first thing we want to look at is are the hips. In men, you want your hips to be less than 40 inches, and in women, less than 35. Then we're going to look at blood pressure. Blood pressure has to be less than 135 over 85 or not on medications. So if your blood pressure is normal on medication, doesn't count because it's artificially normal. So pretty simple, less than 135 over 85. The next one is pretty simple. Triglycerides less than or equal to 150, or once again, are you on a medication for triglycerides? Because if you're on a medication for these things, you automatically get it. So, are your triglycerides greater than 150 milligrams per deciliter or more, or are you on something that is supposed to help you with your triglycerides number? After that, we want to talk about, is your blood sugar 100 milligrams per deciliter fasting or greater? So if you're fasted, is your blood sugar 100 milligrams per deciliter or greater? If so, or once again, are you taking a medication? Are you on metformin? Are you on insulin? Once again, if you are, bingo, you automatically have it. So that one counts too. You have to have 3 or more of these symptoms. And last but not least, we're going to talk about HDLs. If you're male, your HDLs are less than or equal to 40. And if you're female, it's less than or equal to 50. So if you have 3 of those, you have metabolic syndrome. And this is one of those things where you've got to be metabolically flexible. Your body has to be able to either burn glucose for energy or ketones for energy. And this is where, if you have this, you've got some work to do, but it is reversible and it is you can help it. So with metabolic syndrome defined, and I push metabolic syndrome, it's what I see the most, and it's pretty innocuous. Guys, girls, they just don't think anything about having a large waist. They don't think anything about the high blood pressure because it's not hurting them, it's not causing anything, or it's controlled by meds. And this is where things really start to spin out of control because the insults on the body are starting to accumulate. So we're getting farther and farther behind the curve. With that being said, what do you do about high blood sugar? What can happen? What are the things that need to be done to start to help the body get back in line? Because the body wants to heal. Contrary to popular belief, the body is not just wanting to break. It doesn't want to break. It wants to heal. It wants to survive. It wants to go on. A lot of things that it does are coping mechanisms so that it will survive. Insulin resistance is so it will survive. So what can be done about that? Surprisingly enough, the number one thing that you can do to help your blood sugar is get good sleep. You need to be able to get 8 hours of sleep. You need to give your body an 8-hour sleep opportunity, as they say, so that it can reset. This is when your hormones start to reset. And not only do your hormones reset, but your insulin sensitivity. If you get good sleep, meaning you can go to bed and you sleep 7.5 to 8 hours, 7.5, 8 hours, uninterrupted. You get up without being prompted, without something waking you up, and you're ready to go. That's sleep. And sleep, if you read all the sleep books by Matthew Walker, and there's 1,000 of them out there. The biggest thing that you need to do is know that you can't medicate yourself for sleep, because the analogy they use is I can come up and knock you out with a bat, but you're not actually getting good sleep. When you take medications to help you sleep, or you drink alcohol, or you're doing weed, or whatever the case may be that you're using to sedate yourself, if you're doing that, then you've got an issue and you got to address it. One of the first things you can do for sleep is have a routine. have a before bed routine, get into bed within an hour of each night. That way your body gets used to that and your body likes that. And it'll take 3 or 4 days for your body to really start to plug in, and then it starts to become a habit. And that's when you really start to get good sleep. If you are getting less than that amount of sleep, then you can actually decrease your insulin sensitivity by as much as 25%. That's how important sleep is. And if you're doing 4 hours of sleep to 5 hours of sleep routinely, then you are really setting yourself up for diabetes and metabolic syndrome and a whole host of other things that aren't good. If you want to know more on how to fix your sleep, read Matthew Walker's book, Why We Sleep. If you go onto Amazon and you look up sleep books, he's in there. There's several others, and they're all quite interesting. I have like probably 6 to 10 books on sleep, and pretty much every functional medicine doctor. That's the first thing they hit, because in America, that's one of the first things that tanks on us. Next, we're going to go into nutrition. And I have a very simple approach. The baseline stance is if it has a barcode or nutrition facts on it, it's probably crappy food. You really want to be eating very simply, and you want to go to farmers markets and things like that to get your nutrition. And you want to make sure that you talk to the farmer and make sure they're not putting you want to make sure they're not putting poisons, they're not putting glyphosate, and they're not putting those things on the food that you're eating, because you can wash it, but it just doesn't wash off well. And what about when you pick it up? It gets into the skin and it will actually absorb through the skin. While you're thinking about that, the other way to think about nutrition is nutrition, good nutrition, actually compounds the benefits of sleep, because it's giving your body all the building materials that it needs to build a better you. And if you're not eating good food, then you're not building a better you. Nowhere in your body does it use Twizzlers or Twix or Snickers or any candy bar. And fast food is not real food either. So you've got to pay attention to that. And let's say you are eating out of boxes and cans, read the ingredients. If there's something on there you don't know what it is, or if there's something on there that you can't pronounce it, it looks like a chemical cocktail, don't eat it. Don't put it into your body. It's viewed as a foreign substance. It will activate the immune system, and the older you get, the worse it gets. Now, let's say you are doing well with your eating and stuff like that, and your triglycerides and your glucose is high, those types of things are high. Well, you really need to start to think about doing something like time restricted feeding, or you could do something like fasting, but you may need to build up to that. As I discussed earlier, if you're fasting, you need to make sure that you're healthy enough to fast. Is your body metabolically flexible? What we do with our patients with time restricted feeding, I don't like to call it intermittent fasting. I like Peter Attia's thing, Dr. Attia's moniker of time restricted feeding. You really want that window to be 6 to 8 hours. And if you're eating in a 6 to 8 hour window, then you're really doing good for yourself. But in the beginning, a lot of people can't do that. So take your window from 12 hours down to 10 hours, down to 8 hours every couple of days. So let's say you start at 12 on Monday. By Wednesday, you should maybe try to go down to 11 or 10. By the weekend, maybe you could go down to 10 or 9. And so as your body, it's repetitions. It's like going to the gym. You just increase it every few days or even once a week so that your body gets used to the stress. And then once you get down to that 6 to 8 hours, you're golden, man or girl, whoever. The next thing you want to make sure when you're eating, you're getting good fats, because that's how your body makes your hormones. You have to have good fats. You have to have good fibers, and you have to have good protein. Your fibers will also constitute good carbohydrates typically. So if you're eating good carbohydrates, you're probably getting good fiber. And it's just simple. It's not hard. Your body will do the rest. Give it more good things than bad things, and it can recover. As we go into the next lifestyle intervention, we're going to talk about movement. I'm not talking about hardcore exercise. I'm not talking about, for those that know me, I'm not talking about CrossFit actually. I'm not talking about Ironman competitions or any of that stuff. Just movement. Get outside, go for a walk, put away the phone, get into nature, do those things, and your body will start to actually thank you. Dr. Hyman put out an article that said after you eat a meal, go for a 20-minute walk. That 20-minute walk will activate the muscle mass in you, your muscles, and they have independent glucose sinks, and they can pull that glucose in and burn it without using insulin. And it's a good thing. So really take a good look at it. How much movement are you getting? You have to really think about the human body. Our eyes are in front of our heads. That means that we're more predatory, and we don't have nails and we don't have fangs. So we don't kill things like that, like a bear or a big cat or something of that nature. How did we kill things? How did we get our food? We wounded it and then we ran it to death, quite literally, or we killed it with one shot, whatever the case may be, bludgeoned it to death with stones and clubs. Who knows? I mean, could have gone all caveman, but for the lifetime or the lifespan of the body, the human body, as you look at it, that's what it has millennia and millennia of time doing. You know, the advent of guns and things like that are a small fragment of time of man. Otherwise, man, it was old school, manual and running, manual and manual. So you really got to think about that. That's what your body is actually used to and what it was designed for. If you need more help with movement, then there are wearables and trackables. Um, and so your Aura Ring will read your movement. There's a wonderful device out there that I like called a Morpheus device, and it's a chest strap and it links to your phone, and it gives you zone 1, zone 2, zone 3. In the morning you do a reading. It gauges your heart rate variability, and then it will start to set your heart rate zones. And all you got to do is fill the bars up. So about as simple as it can be, but then you can also see how much you do, or more importantly, how much you don't move, because our bodies need it. That's, if you look at the legs, when your heart beats, it pushes blood out and it goes to the extremities. How does it get back? Because the heartbeat doesn't beat, the heart does not beat hard enough to push that blood back up. Muscle contraction squeezes the blood up from the feet and the legs back into the torso. And that movement it's very dependent on you moving, playing, getting out and walking, doing those things. So if you need to know how much you are or really aren't moving, get an Aura Ring. I think they're less than $200. The Morpheus device is $99 when I last checked. And if you want to track your blood sugar and ketones, go onto the products page of Integrated Health of Indiana and look at it. And you'll see that there's a device called the Keto Mojo. So you can read glucose and ketones. And that's the device I personally use. I also use the Aura Ring, and I also use the Morpheus strap when I'm doing my either weights or I'm doing my cardio. The other thing I'll say is if you're conditioned for it, don't be afraid to lift heavy things, because muscle mass, especially as you start to get older, is very important. As you get older, age is one of the biggest comorbidities to all chronic diseases, including diabetes and cancer and all of those things. And if you happen to get cancer, One of the things that looks at how you're going to survive is age and then muscle mass. How's your protein doing? You have to move and you have to develop and keep that muscle mass. We're seeing a epidemic of low testosterone because guys don't lift and we don't do heavy things. We don't lift heavy things. We don't move heavy things. We don't work outside. We sit behind monitors and do notes or play games, which I'm not against playing games and relaxation. You need that downtime. But I am against it all the time, and that's the only thing that you do. Some of the things that I do, I'll get out and I will fly remote control airplanes. I go for bike rides. I lift weights. I shoot bow. We garden. We build greenhouses. I mean, that's my weekend. My weekend is not spent inside. My weekend is spent outside doing stuff. And that's what the body needs. This next lifestyle issue is stress. Everybody has stress. It's not if you have stress, it's how you deal with the stress. So it's kind of dependent on the stress that you have. Do you have financial stress? Do you have marital stress? Do you have mental stress? Um, it doesn't matter if the stress is real or if it's a perceived stress. That stress needs to be mitigated and dealt with. So if you need help, you need to talk to somebody about it. If you have financial stress, you need to make a plan as to how you're going to get out of it and execute on that plan. One of the best things to mitigate stress is to have a plan and be doing something. If you feel bad, go to the gym and work out and tell me how bad you feel at the end of it. Not like, oh my God, I did so much and I can't scratch my head because my arms are blown out, or I can't walk, or the funniest is, oh my God, I can't sit down. It's just go to the gym and work out, get the blood pumping, get a little bit of a sweat on, and then see how you feel at the end of it and see if that stress means as much. It probably doesn't. And just realize everybody has stress. Most stressors are temporary and will pass. So if you're ruminating on something and thinking and thinking and thinking about it, that's called rumination. You really need to write it down and make a plan on how to fix it so that you don't ruminate on it and you can be doing something about it. That is the best plan. And typically, if you start doing things, then things start happening and the stress goes away. Most stressors are temporary. So don't think it's the end of the world. Things that help you in the moment mitigate stress, like I said, exercise. Go to the gym, go for a run, go for a bike ride, go for a swim. I don't care. Get out and go do something. Next thing is 4-7-8 breathing. 4 seconds in, 7-second hold, and then an 8-second out through the mouth. That helps stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. Do it 6 or 7 times, and then you'll notice that the stress goes down. In the morning, I am generally in a cold plunge, and I will do 12 of those breaths, which usually takes somewhere around 4.5 to 5 minutes. And it's just very peaceful and relaxing. And that's what you want. You want it to be peaceful and relaxing because that takes you from sympathetic to parasympathetic. And you want to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. So you go into rest and digest. I did actually forget to say things that are repetitious. So chants, singing, humming the song over and over again, rosary, prayer beads, those types of things are things that calm the body down. And that repetitious movement that actually puts you into a parasympathetic state. Hang in there with me. We're almost done. We're at community. And so community is really simple. You need to take a step back and really evaluate your friends and the people that are around you. Do they build you up or do they tear you down? Are they positive or are they always negative? And if you're hanging with the always negative person, what that does to the mind is it starts to rewire your mind into a negative state, and it stays there until you actively try to rewire it for positivity. That's why, mantras and speaking positivity to yourself in the mirror, those things work because they start to rewire the way your brain behaves. And so you don't want negativity. You don't want to see somebody and just, they're going to talk about this, that, and the other. They're going to talk about other people. They're going to talk politics. They're going to talk whatever. And you physically feel your energy get sucked out of you. That type of person you need to minimize contact with or stay away from. Or if you're married to them, you've got to sit down and talk to them and tell them, I can't. We can sit here and you can go at it for 2 minutes and then we're done because the negativity has got to stop. There's a great book called Boundaries that talks about that. So if you have life draining, soul sucking friends, get new friends. An interesting study about community is when they look at community, you are the combination of like the 5 closest people around you. So look at the 5 closest people around you, and you probably all make about the same amount of money. You probably all are kind of the same weight. And that's because you guys will have the same habits, the same similar environment. And so you need to change that, because if you go out drinking every night, that becomes a habit, and those alcohol's a depressant and it will bring you down over time. I Trust me, I like a good beer, but I don't drink a lot anymore because in the long run, there's nothing redeeming about alcohol. And people like to say it helps them relax and it helps them sleep. The Aura Ring, get one. If you believe that, get one. Have your drinks and watch your sleep. It will be absolute garbage. And so, alcohol is a once in a great, great while. And I don't have or hang out regularly with people who drink because I'll want to. I just know that about myself. Last but not least are supplements. If you don't have your sleep, nutrition, and things on point, unless you're using a supplement like melatonin short time to try to reset your sleep or to help you get into a rhythm for sleep, don't waste your time if you don't have the other lifestyle stuff on point, because you're just going to waste that. If you look on our YouTube channel and you see Protease, the unsung hero, when I'm talking to Dr. Bastidas, at the end of that, I ask him about how important is nutrition, and how this ties into the supplements is, he says, if you don't have your nutrition and sleep on point, you can't out supplement a bad lifestyle. In triathlon, we say you can't outrun a crappy diet, and it holds true, especially the older we get. You just have to have lifestyle on point, and then the body can do the things that it needs to do. But if you keep adding stuff for the body to do, then it never catches up. Down below in the description, I will have the supplements that I use, and you are welcome. I shouldn't say I use, supplements I use with my patients that help with blood sugar, and we want to use these only short term, because if we're truly getting to the root cause, it is helping all of the ailments that you have. The body is a system, and you cannot affect one part of the system and not have it help other things. If you're using medications, which generally medications work on inhibition, it's a great money-making thing, hands down, because if I don't get rid of the root cause of what is causing your symptoms, if I don't get rid of the root cause, man, I can sit there and chase symptoms forever, whether it's pharmacology or green pharmacy. I could sit here and give you a pill for an ill or a supplement for a symptom all day long. That's not the idea. The idea is to get to the root cause, because if you're at the root cause, it affects everything. And that's what we see in our clinic time and time again. So thank you for your time. And if you like this video, please follow us on YouTube. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. When we hit that 1,000 subscribers, we have a lot of things to give away. Down below are the supplements that I use with my patients for glucose and to try to start their healing journey. And like I said, we want to get away from those. But if you need a little help in the beginning, that's okay. And use the crutch. But then it's just that, it's a crutch, and it's meant only for short term. Other than that, I hope you are living the life that you want to live, and we're here at Integrated Health of Indiana to help you heal from the inside out.